Let's take a look at some of the top stories. The EU has announced plans to develop a fully operational anti-drone system by 2027, aiming to strengthen defenses against potential Russian attacks. Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas has emphasized that drone defenses are now essential as drones are redefining modern warfare. Yemen's Houthi have confirmed that the death of Chief of Staff Mohammed al-Karim al-Ghamari, calling him a senior military leader killed while fulfilling his duties. The group has warned that Israel would face retaliation for its actions without directly blaming it for the killing. MI5 chief Ken McCallum has said that Britain faces growing threats from hostile states including Russia and Iran as well as China. While terrorism risks from al-Qaeda and ISIS remain huge, the agency has disrupted multiple surveillance plots and tracked over 20 potentially lethal Iran-backed operations. At least 40 civilians were killed in clashes along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border before a truce was reached, according to Afghan health officials. The deadly exchanges erupted amid rising tensions between Kabul and Islamabad over cross-border shelling and security operations. Israel has returned the bodies of 30 Palestinians to Gaza today, bringing the total to 120, according to the Hamas-run Health Ministry and Nasser Hospital. This comes under the ceasefire deal. Israel has agreed to return 15 Palestinian bodies for every deceased Israeli handed over by Hamas. Bangladeshi persecutors have demanded the death penalty for fugitive ex-Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, accusing her of crimes against humanity over 2024 crackdown that has killed up to 1,400 people, according to the United Nations. Hasina is being tried in absentia from India as the trial enters its final stages ahead of Bangladesh's February elections. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has moved to an end controversy over a collapsed China spying case by releasing witness statements has sparked fresh questions about government transparency and ministerial involvement. This comes amid increase of criticism that Starmer's government is prioritizing economic ties with Beijing over national security. The world's economy for failing to end hunger during a speech at the UN Agricultural Agency. Meanwhile, the Vatican's Child Protection Commission has rebuked senior Catholic leaders for moving too slowly to aid clergy abuse victims and implementing global safeguarding reforms in the 1.4 billion member church. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas has issued a statement highlighting the importance of building anti-drone systems. She has stated that drones are redefining warfare. Kallas has further emphasized that Europe needs to ramp up the production of anti-drone systems to counter Russia. Brussels has also unveiled a roadmap to prepare for potential conflict by 2030. This development comes against the backdrop of continuous drone incursions in countries located on Europe's eastern flank. In recent weeks, Russian drones have caused significant damage to Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which Russia denies. Along with Ukraine, the entire eastern flank of Europe is seeking advanced weapons and anti-drone systems to thwart such attacks. Kaja Kallas has reiterated that having drone defenses is no longer optional. Let's now listen into what she has said.
Drones are already redefining warfare. Having drone defenses is no longer optional for anyone. Today we propose a new anti-drone system to be fully operational by the end of 2027. And this will be done, of course, in close cooperation with NATO. Every country is at risk. Every member state should be investing in counter-drone systems and capabilities to hit ground targets.
Now for this discussion, we're joined by Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, how is this growing number of drone sightings and also this, how is all these things that are happening across Europe is impacting the development of new security measures and defense measures in Europe?
Yes, absolutely. The European defense should be protected against Russian drones. There is no doubt about that. And more those incursions happen as we see over the last 2, 3 weeks. First it was in Poland, then it was in Romania, then it was in Denmark and in Estonia, and even United Kingdom MI5 also signal potential dangers. Obviously, the future of the European security should be primarily, first and foremost, to establish a wall against any possible incursion of, well, Russia is the biggest threat to the European security, and for that matter, for the global security. There is no doubt about that. No other countries in the world engage in such brutal, unprovoked aggression into another country, into a neighboring country, as Russia did against Ukraine. And obviously everybody in the world, including in the global south, countries should be worried about Russia and what it can do in the future. And for that matter, we should pay all respect and dignity to the Ukrainian army, which is basically containing that Russian threat. Ukraine is acting for all of us. For all 192 countries in the world, apart from Russia, Ukrainian is defending every single country in the world against the Russian military threat. It's simple, it's clear. We should support Ukraine, and we should sanction Russia, and we should protect our borders against Russian incursion, against the biggest aggressor of the 21st century. Absolutely clear. It should have been done already.
And
No doubt.
Professor, what do you think about India? U.S. has now criticized India as well as Japan that they are continuing to buy Russian oil or crude that is facilitating this attack on Europe, not Europe, but Ukraine. So how do you think, how can European countries collaborate to create standardized regulations and also deter these to respond Russian attacks?
Yes, the Europeans do a lot. They sanction Russia. They stop buying Russian oil and gas, with very few exceptions. Hungary and Slovakia, two pro-Putinist regimes in Europe, continue buying Russian oil and gas. But India does, and that's absolutely inexplicable why India did raise from 1% of all import back in 2022 to 40% of Indian imports of Russian oil. And it's high time for this to end, because it is fueling the war. Putin has no other money out of anywhere apart from selling oil and gas. And every country that buys Russian oil and gas is contributing to the war, giving Putin more ammunition to kill civilians and children in Ukraine. It's very clear. It's black and white. So obviously India should reconsider, and hopefully we see already signals for that. India is talking of stopping buying Russian oil and gas, so should do all other countries. All the world should be united against Russia, very simple, with establishing protection, with supporting Ukrainian, with any weapons Ukrainian needs should be given to Ukraine, including the Tomahawks. Finally, Donald Trump started talking about this, to allow Ukraine to use long-range missiles to be able to hit Russian military targets deep into Russian territory. Again, it should have been done already in order to bomb Russian military and oil refineries deep into the Russian territory. This is the only language Putin understands. There is no other. There is no purpose to meet Putin and to talk to him. He should be given firm military response deep into his territories, hitting military objects and oil refineries all over Russia, and also establishing a wall of protection and sanctions on Russian assets in all foreign banks. So these are very clear issues, and I keep repeating them for 3.5 years, but unfortunately without much of a still global front. Finally, we have good signals, as you said, Suma. We are moving there. Things are getting into the right way, with Donald Trump finally realizing how to deal with Russia. Also, the signals from White House the last days are quite positive. Europeans have been always united, but somehow the decision-making has been slow. And for that matter, again, finally, we have some clarity on that European countries will establish a defense wall against Russia.
Thank you, Professor Veselin Popovsky, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we stay in the region. UK's MI5 Director General Ken McCallum has delivered his annual speech outlining threats to the United Kingdom. McCallum has reiterated the growing aggression on British soil, informing that since last year, there has been a 35% increase in the number of individuals being investigated for involvement in state threat activity. He has also discussed cooperation with other partners across Europe to counter and detect individuals acting on behalf of Russia. The Director General further criticized Iranian efforts to silence its opponents in the UK and worldwide. He has informed that MI5 has tracked more than 20 potentially Iran-backed plots over the past year. This statement comes amid reports of espionage attempts by China in the British soil as well. Let's listen into what Director General of MI5 has said.
I spoke 12 months ago about rising aggression on UK soil. Data on MI5's operations extends that worsening trend. State threats are escalating. In the last year, we've seen a 35% increase in the number of individuals we're investigating for involvement in state threat activity. In the last year, we and the police have disrupted a steady stream of surveillance plots with hostile intent, aimed at individuals Russian leaders perceive as their enemies. And we're seeing Russia-based figures using online platforms in wider attempts, largely unsuccessful, to sow the seeds of violence, chaos and division here in the UK.
Now for this discussion, we go back to Professor Veselin Popovsky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, with a reported 35% increase, what new strategies is or could MI5 employ to adapt to the evolving tactics of foreign intelligence services?
Yes, it is disturbing to hear that. Russia is acting this way everywhere, not only against United Kingdom. It kind of inserts its agents, its spies in many European countries. They are trying to disturb the usual regular life of many citizens across Europe. Also supporting some terrorist groups, some extreme right-wing movements. In any way, what Russia wants is to disrupt the life in democracies, and it not only invaded Ukraine, but also is aiming at major disruptions in, well, I used to watch the Russian TV, and it always reports about some sort of crisis and catastrophes all over Europe. For any minor, little crime, they will present it as a big elephant. That's what Russian propaganda has always been doing. Somehow, I had friends in Russia who are calling me and saying, when will the European Union collapse and when NATO will collapse? And all these questions kind of signal to me that in the Russian media, in the Russian population, there is always an expectation that European Union will collapse very soon. And obviously that is a result of those incursions. And for that matter, yes, MI5, but also all other intelligence services should take this very seriously. They should combat any attempt to disturb the normal life of their citizens against those attacks. Sometimes they are cyber attacks, sometimes they are propaganda attacks. I'm sure MI5 already officially announcing those figures, those numbers, meaning that they are prepared to take serious action against those.
With that, I would like to thank Professor Veselin Popovsky for joining us and sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next news. The Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa has addressed the issue of rebuilding Gaza following the U.S.-brokered Israel-Hamas ceasefire agreement during a press conference in Ramallah. He has stated that Ramallah-based Palestinian Authority would work with international institutions and partners to address Gaza's security, logistical, financial, as well as governance challenges. Let's listen into what he has said.
The 5-year program is structured in 3 sequential phases. The first phase, a 6-month emergency phase, focused on early recovery valued at $3.5 billion. The second phase, a 3-year reconstruction and recovery phase, valued at about $30 billion. And the third phase will cover the rest of the program. Together, these phases provide a coherent pathway from relief to sustainable development, ensuring that immediate interventions are linked to institutional recovery, economic revival, and durable reconstruction. Hopefully, in the coming month, November, Egypt will convene the Gaza Reconstruction Conference in Cairo. This conference will serve as the central platform for mobilizing international resources and partnerships, while reaffirming that all efforts are anchored in Palestinian national ownership and leadership. The government of Palestine reaffirms that effective governance in Gaza is an essential pillar.
Now for this discussion, we're joined by Dan Perry. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Dan, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, Dan, looking at this news, also looking at recent events that are happening in Gaza, between Gaza and Israel, the international community has been divided over how to handle Hamas and how to also handle Palestinian authorities, such as what we just heard from the Palestinian Authority. So do you believe these groups should be treated primarily as a political entity? Who do you think should be treated as a governing body, legitimate body? Yeah.
Well, as occurs often in life, and as occurs almost always in the Middle East, the trick is to identify what is the least bad option. And a genuinely good option is not necessarily available. So the right-wing government of Benjamin Netanyahu has been, for the past many years, trying to demonize the Palestinian Authority, and I've even heard them claiming that they are as bad as Hamas or worse, which is preposterous. The Palestinian Authority probably should be restored to Gaza from where they were kicked out in a military coup of sorts by Hamas in 2007. That said, Israel has legitimate claims against the PA, as do the Palestinians. PA has been corrupt, incompetent, and inefficient. It's really constituted a waste of a lot of the billions that the world community has poured into the effort to build Palestine. And for almost 30 years, as a state in waiting, they haven't done a very good job of making people confident in their ability to run a state that is functional. There are 2 primary reforms that the world wants of the PA. One is for them to change their educational curriculum, which weirdly still sort of educates the youth of Palestine to war and not to peace. And the other is to stop paying the families of people in Israeli prison, many of whom are pretty heavy-duty terrorists, money, which is seen as essentially encouragement for terrorists to carry out terrorism. The latter issue has been somewhat resolved to a degree by the fact that Israel had to release most of them, not all of them, but most of them, in the deal with Hamas this week. I think the PA probably should be strong-armed to do these and other reforms and be seen as a government in waiting in Gaza. And until then, there needs to be some transitional situation. They've spoken of a government of technocrats appointed, presumably in the end by the PA. With a little bit of a pretense that the PA is not yet in charge in Gaza. And of course, an international oversight committee chaired by Donald Trump, which is a little ridiculous, but the situation is ridiculous. So it's not clear, it's fuzzy. Right now, the main challenge is to get Hamas out of the way. And the main problem is that even though Trump pretended otherwise, Hamas has not formally accepted the 20-point plan that involves their disarmament and removal. And the signs to date are very bad. They don't appear to be preparing to disarm and waiting for the details of who to hand their weapons to. Rather, they're appointing chieftains all over the areas of Gaza vacated by the IDF and murdering clan officials and leaders who they deem insufficiently loyal. So someone's got to step in pretty quickly with a very big hammer, and I fear that has to be Hamas's, well, not sponsors exactly, but the mediators close to Hamas, which would be Qatar, Turkey, and also Egypt. It has to be made very clear to the Palestinians that there will be absolutely no reconstruction in any territory that is controlled by Hamas. It sounds cruel, and I think that would therefore have to be married to a policy that enables the Palestinians to flee those areas and to find a decent life elsewhere. It's messy. It's really not peace in our time quite yet, and that's the landscape more or less.
Dan, talking about reconstruction, I wanted to shed light or ask about this. The fact that a lot of European countries have already come up with how much they are going to be contributing to reconstruction of Gaza. And we also see a lot of countries pushing Russia to pay for the reconstruction of Ukraine after post-war. So do you think Israel should also pay for post-war Gaza's reconstruction?
That's an interesting question. Hard to say. Maybe. It'll be difficult to get the Israelis to agree, not because they lack the funds, although, I mean, they don't really need this additional expense, but because it would involve some notion that reparations are needed and that Israel created more destruction in Gaza than was absolutely necessary, and they're going to reject that idea. And if they accept that idea, that also exposes them to potential charges, well, of war crimes. The analogy is very, very flawed because the Russia and Ukraine is purely a case of Russian aggression against Ukraine, which, as far as I can tell, even though some elements in the world might agree to acquiesce with to a degree, maybe supporting the notion of paying off Russia with part of the territory of eastern Ukraine, Donbass in particular. No one really thinks the Russian attack on Ukraine is justified. Whereas in the case of Israel and Palestine, Israel was attacked. And what is clearly a genocidal attack on October 7th, killing Jews for the sake of killing Jews, and not only that, but in the most purposeful and engineered savagery, truly diabolical, I mean, perhaps I've ever seen in my lifetime. Israel's response to that is a clear case of self-defense. Did they go too far? Was there anything else they could have done? Who's to blame? It's complex because Hamas really does put civilians purposely in harm's way. Hamas, and this is hard for some people to hear, but they're naive. Hamas wants Palestinians to be killed because it has PR value for them against Israel. Hamas is a nihilistic jihadist group that seeks and thrives from destruction. Hamas used mosques, schools, hospitals, UN sites as weapons depots, as rocket firing facilities, as offices and headquarters. They did this purposely to draw fire to civilian areas. So to get Israel to now pay for the resulting destruction is going to be tough.
Thank you very much, Dan, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we stay in the region. Yemen's Houthis have confirmed the death of their Chief of Staff, Mohammed al-Karim al-Ghamari, on Thursday, describing him as one of the group's most senior military officials. The Houthis said he was killed while fulfilling his duties and warned that Israel would receive its deterrent punishment for the crimes it has committed, though they did not explicitly blame Israel for the killing. The announcement comes amid ongoing regional tensions, with the Houthis launching missiles towards Israel in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, most of which were intercepted. In response, Israel has carried out airstrikes on Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. Now for this discussion, we go back to Dan Perry. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you, Dan, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, although they have not explicitly stated that Israel has done that. What impact does this make, and also the death of this particular individual, al-Ghamari, likely to have on the Houthis' military command structure and operational capacity in the region?
Hard to say, quite possibly very little. These terrorist groups have an assembly line of terrorists that are always ready to take the position of the next person killed above them in the hierarchy. There are some iconic leaders. When Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, was killed, that was meaningful because he had tremendous charisma. He was a public figure. He was absolutely an avatar and an icon of that particular terrorist group. And their current weakening is certainly related to his disappearance and that of the entire cadre that was with him, basically. In this case, the only public figure of the Houthis, other than their spokesman who appears screaming and shouting on video every now and again, but the true leader is Abdel Malik al-Houthi. He's a major figure. His death would be meaningful. I don't think this case is as such, nor do I think there's any discussion about how Israel is responsible or not. Israel, I think, claims responsibility. He was wounded in an Israeli strike that came obviously in response to Houthi attacks. Israel's perspective is that, with all due respect to the Houthis' solidarity with the Palestinians, Israel's under attack by a terrorist group that has taken over half of Yemen, roughly. And it's not legitimate. And it's not just Israel being damaged. The Houthis at some point were impeding about a quarter of maritime trade, or at least a quarter of the global container traffic, and a huge proportion of global maritime trade, which caused price rises all over the world and caused ships that had nothing to do with Israel to have to circumvent Africa to get to Europe and to America from the east. This is ridiculousness. It's piracy. It's absolute aggression. And of course, the Houthis are criminals against the Yemeni people as well. About 400,000 people have died in Yemen in a decade plus since the Houthis have been successful in occupying parts of the country. Part of that from cholera, a lot from just war deaths, torture, misery, poverty, and absolute mania. I mean, their slogan is, death to Israel, death to America, as opposed to life to Yemen. Houthis are a very major problem. I tend to think that now that Iran has been so weakened and maybe can be chastened to stop funding and arming them, and maybe that could just be blocked, probably the war against the Houthis led by Saudi Arabia and the UAE should restart. As a favor for the people of Yemen, I don't know what else to say. I've never met a person who wants to live under the rule of the Houthis, which is some weird, specifically Middle Eastern fusion of theocracy and mafia.
Yes, I agree. Thank you very much, Dan, for sharing that insight as a political analyst and from Tel Aviv. Thank you. Now we move on to our next news. Greece's parliament has passed a controversial labor reform today, permitting private sector employers to extend working hours up to 13 hours, citing the need for a more flexible labor market. The law applies only 3 days a month and up to 37 days a year, and protects workers from dismissal if they refuse overtime. Let's listen into the explanation provided by the Greek Labor Minister, Niki Keramios.
Ώρες, εμείς ερχόμαστε και δίνουμε μια νέα δυνατότητα στον εργαζόμενο. Αυτό που ήδη κάνει σε 2 εργοδότες, αν το επιθυμεί, να το κάνει σε έναν, άρα α, χωρίς να μετακινείται, και β, με 40% αύξηση στις αποδοχές του. Το νομοσχέδιο αυτό διευκολύνει τις επιχειρήσεις. Διευκολύνει, επιταχύνει προσλήψεις. Η ολοκλήρωση της πρόσληψης, αντί να χρειάζονται 4 έγγραφα, να χρειάζεται μόνο 1. Ψηφιακά αρχεία για όλες τις εργασιακές σχέσεις. Δυνατότητα για fast track προσλήψεις ακόμα και από το κινητό. Μείωση γραφειοκρατίας, κατάργηση εντύπων. Αφού όλα αυτά υπάρχουν ψηφιακά, γιατί να ταλαιπωρούμε την αγορά εργασίας, εργαζομένους και επιχειρήσεις με την υποχρέωση προσκόμισης όλων αυτών των εντύπων. Και ναι.
That's all we have time for. We will keep bringing you more news updates from around the world.